Howdy.
Hello, what's up?
Not much. I'm doing a live stream. That's always cool. How about you?
I'm doing fine. Let's just get right into it. Kenny, by the way, he, him pronouns.
Oh yeah.
So I've been a fan of yours for quite a while. I watched your content for about 2 years, and I've recently just kind of noticed some things that are problematic to me. Things that I didn't quite instantly pick up on, but in hindsight, a lot of your rhetoric I find to be quite dangerous.
Yeah, hit me up.
So there's several things, but I mainly want to focus on the whole buy guns shtick that you've been on. So just a simple question: with trans suicide rates being as high as they are, how do you find it beneficial to make your call to action buy guns? Do you
Because
not see how there could be a bit of conflict there?
because I've always said that you shouldn't buy guns if you feel like you're not mentally well enough to handle them. I've always been pretty clear about that.
Yeah, right. But with the amount of with the rhetoric from the Republican Party, uh, don't you feel that owning a gun is not a good thing when you're a part of a marginalized community, that it's the social conditions aren't going to get much better for them?
No, I think it's a good thing for them to own guns, especially because they're part of a minority group.
Okay, but can you define genocide first of all? Because what do you necessarily mean when you say genocide? Because in my opinion, you could define what's going on right now as a sort of genocide.
I would agree. Depending on whether you're talking like murderous genocide or cultural genocide, it can range from the systemic exclusion of a group from the public space to laws that are meant to delegitimize and deperson them on an institutional level. To like openly killing all of them. To there are like I think it's the UN definition is one thing. I think broadly speaking, I mean it's like an effort to erase or eliminate um a demographic, a group of people, and whether you do that like through death camps or like socially through ostracization to the point that they have to be marginalized, or through like legal systems, there are some roads you can go down there.
Okay, so with the point we're at now, I would say it's irresponsible language uh, to say, "Oh, just buy guns," because with further escalation, I mean, this is the conservative logic of you're going to need guns to protect, like, over the tyranny of the government, right? If this were to escalate to actual death camps and not just the social ostracization that's happening now, which with the suicide rates being as high as they are, like, you can't deny that that's like part of you know of social conditioning, right? Like, those numbers aren't there for no reason. It's
Well,
because of the culture we've made for trans people. And
yeah, I should note
okay, so
that
with further
when people
extremism
talk,
from the Republican Party,
well, wait,
then that
this,
problem's only going to get worse.
well,
So
this
don't you see how it's problematic to be making that call to action when we're not at that point yet? And even when we do get to that point, how are citizens owning guns in any sense going to protect against an action from an authoritarian government?
I'm not sure if I understand the relationship between these variables. By that logic, any trans activism is going to exacerbate the reactionary response, which would then exacerbate the social conditions that increase the suicidality of trans people. So, by that logic, like anything good you do would actually be bad. Um, so I don't know if that necessarily follows. The gun ownership isn't about defending yourself against the government either. It's about defending yourself against social unrest if our government ever balkanizes or freezes or shuts down, or if there's instability following a coup attempt or anything like that. In which case, you wouldn't be fighting the government, you would be protecting your neighborhood against roving right-wing militias, which interpersonally, distributed firearms are actually a pretty effective counter to.
Okay, but wouldn't you agree that we're not necessarily at that point yet
You don't
where
wait until you're at that point to buy the guns. When you're at that point, it's too late to buy the guns. You buy the guns before you're at that point.
okay. I mean, I guess I don't really have anything to say about that. I mean, I still disagree with the potential outcome, but I suppose that makes sense in context. So yeah, okay. I
Yeah, we
guess I have
wouldn't
really
want
nothing left to say.
wouldn't want to put it back that far. If you put it back too far, then the conditions might advance to a point where, and gun shop owners tend to be a pretty reactionary group, you know, if they have any explicit agendas they decide to act on in social unrest, it probably wouldn't be in our favor.
But don't you see what I'm saying though, for you as a public figure to be making these claims? Because I get that you can point to historical context that what's going on right now could potentially lead to that sort of social unrest. But the fact that we're not here now, doesn't it? Aren't you? Don't you kind of see how you could be actualizing the situation?
No, I don't think so. The conditions that are being brought about, the ones that I think are going to lead to an exacerbation of this problem, they're not being brought about by trans people owning guns or whatever. They're being brought about by genocidal intent on part of the Republicans. We've seen this play out before, you know. Never before has there been a genocide that wouldn't have happened if only the marginalized community that was being targeted by the powerful political group hadn't been worried about the genocide that was coming for them and sought to defend themselves. These things happen whether they want them to or not. Republicans have never backed off their messaging or backed off their policy prescriptions in response to anything happening in reality. If they were reality, responsive, then they wouldn't have to lie constantly in order to justify their behavior.
Okay, right. That's all true. Like, call out the Republicans, but luckily we still have a democracy. Luckily, I think wouldn't it be better to put your energy towards making sure that Democrats win? Not to lib out on you or anything, but isn't that more effective
I
at
have a
this point in time?
canvassing effort going on right now where there are thousands of people in my community trying to do exactly that. It's not mutually exclusive at all. Me taking 5 seconds to say, yeah, buy guns does in no way detract from that.
Well, I think in a way it does.
Well, how? I say both of them. I mean, when I say, hold on, I need to go to the bathroom, is that me detracting from the Democratic canvassing? Because I say that more often than I say buy guns.
Hmm. I mean, I'm just saying the rhetoric in general kind of inherently detracts because what you're doing is uh, making a call to action against political extremism instead of focusing on the greater point of how can we get political extremists out of office.
But I don't want political extremists out of office. I want my political extremists in office. They can't do that if they're all dead, so they should probably get guns while they can.
But you see what you're saying right now, like when they're all like, don't you see how what you're saying is like exaggerative?
No? People, members of minority groups have died before as a product of social instability and state oppression. It's been known to happen.
Right, but this genocide you're referring to, the further escalation, what I'm saying is it hasn't happened yet. And there's still, I would say, a decent chunk of conservatives that can be moved over by
Well,
pointing out this political extremism. So I'm just saying what you're doing is just counter political extremism when we could be dealing with the political extremism that already exists instead of just creating, more of this rhetoric to go around.
advocating for our Second Amendment rights, if anything, would probably make us even more appealing to the conservatives that you think can be brought over. But
I would disagree with that.
well, I mean, in that case, they're hypocrites, and that's because they're the enemy, right? If they're pro Second Amendment when it's being done by the Republicans, but anti Second Amendment when it's being done by minorities who are under threat of violence from the state, then that is a them thing. That's not a me thing. You know, we
Right,
can't
but
wait until the conditions are at their worst to prepare. You hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And that hopeful part means that, maybe this stuff never comes about. Maybe Democrats, Joe Brandon's been active lately. Maybe they actually take this shit seriously and they cripple the Republican Party by arresting their key members for one of the innumerable crimes they've no doubt committed. And then after they've done that, maybe things go on the down low for a bit. And, I guess then we have some extra guns that we can practice with. I don't know, go to the range. Not a big deal.
it, I don't know. What I'm saying is just what you're saying right now and how you're bringing all of this into your rhetoric. That does make an effect. And I think that does perpetuate violence on the other side as well. Because the way they're going to interpret that, the more this type of language gets popularized on the left, The more conservatives will react and respond to that. They have that to point to now.
I'm telling you, that's
Now
cuck
they can say,
logic
look
that
at the
they've...
extremists on the left.
No,
And
they were saying, look at the extremists on the left all this time over nothing. They're doing it anyway.
right, and now you want to
It
give
doesn't...
them something.
No, it doesn't matter at all. There's no relationship. They will say whatever they want, and their base will believe it. The idea that you have to limit yourself because if you go like, if you ascend your power level, you'll give them more ammunition. It's not true. There's an entire like cottage industry of conservatives whose job it is to make up shit. Critical race theory, made up, completely whole cloth, just a completely fabricated crisis. Right now, this whole trans thing, completely fabricated crisis. It's not being caused by like neo-pronoun xenogender types on Twitter. If it weren't for like the furries, it's not as though Republicans wouldn't have decided to go after these degenerates or, however they justify it. They're gonna do it anyway. And they'll create pretext, And they did this back in Germany too, It was like, oh well, this Jewish guy got in a tussle, a bar fight with a Nazi, and killed him with it, broke a bottle over his head. If only that hadn't happened, then maybe the Holocaust wouldn't have happened, because there was all this media, this actually happened, all this media, drumming up like, oh, look, the Jews are killing us, whatever. The Holocaust would have happened anyway. They'll justify it how they can, but you can't say to yourself, oh, I won't protect myself. I won't engage in preventative defense. Because it might make things worse from them. You can't believe that. That's what they want you to believe, because then they keep you weak while they ramp up the rhetoric anyway.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. But I also just think I can't get my head around the idea that what you're saying, in the event of further action on the right, would guns do more harm than good in terms of self-defense and suicide? Because over half of suicides are used with guns. I mean, that's really the biggest problem with gun ownership in this country. I mean, suicide is more likely with a gun than a homicide, right?
I think so.
So just in
yeah,
basic
I
statistical
think
terms.
they're at least very close. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so do you not see how you're stirring up a potential problem there
Well,
in the event of political extremism?
I don't really think it's fair to just say like, oh, the right-wing militias are arming themselves. You might be able to defend yourself if you did the same, but your demographic has a slightly higher chance of mental instability on account of social, factors. So you can't do that. I mean,
Well,
people, I have to trust people to
in general, that's
exercise.
the reason. I'm just saying in general, that's a reason I don't support advocacy for gun ownership. I think it's counterintuitive.
Well,
but that is a good point you made. I'm just still afraid we're not even close enough yet to the idea of Republican militias running rampant.
well, it happened back during Black Lives Matter. The Patriot Prayer Boys were driving around Portland. You get these dumb fucks in their $80,000 pickup trucks that have never even touched mud before, and you've got 5 or 6 of them in the bed of the truck with their ARs, just like hooting and hollering at people. If things ever really went to shit in this country, like properly, I mean, like some kind of federal government, like political stalemate or a constitutional crisis, like something like that, something really bad. Those groups, those opportunists, they would leap into their local left-leaning cities and try to do what they've been fantasizing about for decades, which is the day of the rope. They're going to run on in there and they take America back, which to them involves what they've been training for, which is the use of their civilian firearms to just reconquer comparatively less well-armed liberal areas. And that's what I want us to be prepared against.
Okay, but Ron DeSantis isn't president yet. I just don't think that's like in our field of vision right now. I think what we have to worry about first and foremost right now is the social ostracization, the various laws coming up in red states.
I mean,
like the problem right now just isn't Republican militias.
But I'm not
damage
doing
is
this
going
to
to
the
be done to that
exclusion.
community through social and legal means.
But I don't oppose pursuing that means. And even if you had to wait for Ron DeSantis for this to come about, 2 years away is not a long time. on the time scales that we're talking about here, right? I mean, but this isn't being done to the detriment of anything. You know, people can own guns and still go out and canvass for Democrats or whatever. I mean, I've done that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess I do see where you're coming from here. So I guess I'm ready to move on to. I just have a couple more things I want to talk about.
Yeah, kill me.
But all right. So I want to talk about your language on black conservatives and how you say that if you're black and conservative, that inherently like makes you worse as a conservative. Could you elaborate on that a little? Because I don't see uh, where you're coming from with that or why that's a good thing to be saying
I don't know what
publicly.
exact language you're referring to. I think I've said that being a turncoat makes you a more dangerous conservative. Like if you're black or trans or something, that your conservatism as like an influencer or whatever, it's not just the regular conservatism. It's, ooh, look, you know, I'm trans and actually I'm represented by Donald Trump. You know, in that respect, I think they're a lot more dangerous in their ability to sort of like hamstring the rights of that minority group. Um, I don't think that I don't think the conservatism itself is worse in them. I just like it makes them more of a like a threat, I guess.
You mean as a public figure exclusively? Because I don't know where or when I heard you say this. It was like maybe like 3 or 4 months ago. But the way you
Interpersonally,
phrased it, it made it.
it would still be a bit in effect interpersonally, not just as a public figure. But obviously it's much worsened. If you're a larger figure with an audience.
Right. Well, that's different. But what I heard you say was effectively black conservatives are worse than white conservatives because they're going against the interests of their own group.
Well, it's definitely less smart for them to be conservatives than
You
it would
see,
be for
like
a white person to be conservative on account of them supporting their oppressors in a very direct sense.
don't you see how that's like problematic language? Don't you see like how people would be turned off by you saying something like that? Don't you see how it kind of dehumanizes the individual and kind of places someone as a representative of their group?
I don't think it
That
dehumanizes
you're
anybody.
that
It's
you're
just like you are literally supporting your opposition. You know, I mean it's like with Blair White, right? Like Blair White has to like grin and bear it with an audience full of people who think that she's a man. You know, because she's like the one good one. You know, for the conservative audience, like it's it's not it's not the best gig. It's definitely worse for them. You know, like I mean, would you say that to a Jewish Nazi, right? Like you know. What the fuck are you doing, man?
well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by worse for them, because I'd say Jesse Lee Peterson is pretty well off in his own head. I mean, in terms of his like monetary success.
Oh, sure, it's profitable to be a turncoat, sure. That guy's fucked in the head though. Um,
Of course, I'm not saying anything about his politics. I'm just saying, but what's the usefulness of this language?
it's just a statement of
Because I
fact.
mean, aren't you a utilitarian? Don't you agree that like you as a public figure, and I'm sure you do calculate quite a lot on considering that what you're going to say is going to have a chainsaw effect.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just a statement of fact, ain't it? When
No, I don't see how it is.
well, if you're black and you're a conservative, you're supporting the ideology that contributes to white supremacy. Now, obviously, liberals in this country do that too, but you know, in a more immediate and direct sense, you're doing so as a black person. So, and it's definitely less smart to do that. I mean, you're acting against your own
Well, no,
interests.
it's not smart to be a white supremacist. Period.
Um,
Like
yeah, morally,
I
but
respect.
well, it's immoral to be a white supremacist. You could argue it's smart to be a white supremacist under a number of circumstances. For example, being a white supremacist in the Confederate South was probably, in terms of self, actualization, probably a little bit smarter than being a an abolitionist, just in terms of climbing the social ladder. It's always immoral in terms of like how smart it is, like you know your own self interest. you know, for with the you know, being a black conservative, I think you're hamstringing yourself more than a white conservative would. But that's not a moral argument. That's just like a why the fuck would you do this type argument, you know?
okay, well, then I'll turn that question on you. Why even bring it up then?
I mean, I say lots of stuff on
Like, what?
stream, but mostly to make fun of them, right? I mean, you gotta be kind of dumb, you know, or at least you're acting dumb to be a minority supporting a conservative agenda. You know, not literally
Okay,
like you
do you
have to
not see
be.
how that's like a targeted, like racialized joke that's not going to help bring over any black conservatives?
Well, it's not a joke, and you know, it is racialized in the sense that race is being referred to. But I mean, I mean, it's true.
Well, no, you're outing people as dumb, and part of the reasoning is because of their race. Wouldn't you say that?
Well, sure. Like if a black guy went into a room that was labeled "black guys die instantly" in here, I would also say that's dumb. But I don't think it'd be racist to say that. Think you could just point at that and go like, yeah, that sure was against his self-interest going in the room that said "black guys die instantly" in here. You know?
Okay, but you can be a conservative, and you don't necessarily have to subscribe to the idea of white supremacy. A lot of conservatives don't know that their politics are inherently racist, or that they
Oh, sure.
support
Yeah.
systemic racism. A lot of them don't even believe it exists. I'm not saying that's an okay belief to have. I'm saying that they personally aren't. They don't believe that this goes against the interests of black people.
No, I
They
agree
have
with that. I just think that's kind
bought
of
into the same
that's what
logic
I'm
that
saying is
white
dumb.
conservatives have.
Well, that's what I'm saying is dumb. Yeah, like it's a logical fault, you know?
Okay, but it's a logical fault regardless.
Well,
You can
no, because you could.
in the same way that a white conservative cannot understand how systemic racism works, a black conservative can do the same.
Yeah, the difference being that it might not necessarily be in the perceived self-interest, or it might not be in the perceived self-interest of the white person to be a white supremacist. See, I don't think being a white supremacist makes you stupid. There are intellectually consistent ways to believe in that, you know, ideology. Not, you know, I don't think that makes it moral. However, like being, you know, there can be some argument about like self-interest there. But generally speaking, yeah, I'd say it's pretty dumb to be a member of a group and then to join the group that dislikes your group. You know, I don't think you can say it's like an optical fault or whatever, but I think it's, you know, still true. And I think there's some value in kind of pointing out how fucking dumb minorities who grift for conservatives can be. You know, there's some value in that. Lord knows black people have been doing it for a good long time. They have a whole litany of words, terms, and ideas that I can't even say on stream without getting in trouble to refer to black people who are active enablers of white supremacy.
Okay, well, yeah, it's an optics fault, is what I'm saying then. Uh, I just don't see how it's useful, and I also see this in, for instance, the J.K. Rowling tweet, like women be quieter and stay in the kitchen. Like, don't you kind of see how you're isolating yourself from the broader left by doing stuff like this?
I mean, clearly, if I cared that much
Like
about
doing things.
optics, I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in, right? This stuff like this happens to me every third day. Past a point, we have
Okay,
to
well,
make
why do you
choices.
do it then?
Well,
I feel
part
like you have enough self control not to do it. I mean, you seem like a very calculative guy, right?
Thank you. I'm actually a huge dumbass, but you know, part of it's just an authenticity thing. I mean, if I hyper calculated the optimal move every time I did or said anything, then I don't know, that comes across as kind of robotic. Obviously, I have my aesthetic and personality flourishes. In the case of the J.K. Rowling thing, though, I don't think it really like isolated me that much. I think the
Well, no,
discourse is
that it's
broadly
more
kind
of
of
like a
funny.
pattern of that type of thing that seems to just alienate you from a lot of people on the left.
Well, a lot of
When
people on
I
the left
think,
are cucks.
okay, but like, what? Why just be overtly sexist in the, just to, like, for the shock value, like just
Hardly
to be like,
shocking. Women shut up and be quiet. Like that's not really shocking, right? Like that's like
because your explanation for why that was
6-year-old.
okay was because, well, it wouldn't it be better that J.K. Rowling target me instead of someone else.
Well, the issue that I had is
Well,
that people
but
came up with all these bullshit like explanations for how very light sexism on the TL is going to advance the genocide of trans people or something. But like the real position, and I've been consistent in this. The real position is that like I don't really care. It's a light bit of fun. I don't really have an issue with people engaging in that kind of behavior generally. The main issue that I had was the behavior of the left after that tweet. You know, like if somebody is engaging in some like second grade recess period sexism over their Lunchables, and you know, a billionaire author throws a fit over it, I think that the appropriate response is to go after the billionaire and not like pretend that the Lunchables sexism is like a serious affront to the rights of women. But you know,
all
I
right.
mean,
Well,
the
as you
left is retarded. So you know, you get the hand you're dealt, I guess, in the
uh,
universe, and
uh,
that's life.
all right. Well, as you've seen, that's the reaction that's going to happen. They're like you're drawing more attention away from J.K. Rowling and the billionaires, and you're the attention is going on you. Like I'm just saying, don't you see the value in having that sort of optics control?
Well, the problem
Like
is the left is full of
as
people.
someone with 400K subscribers on YouTube, as someone with a decent chunk of influence, like don't you see how you're kind of going against the grain of what you're advocating for
No,
by
not. I don't
engaging in
think
this
I'm
sort of silly
going
thing?
against the grain at all. I mean, again, like if we accept the idea that any behavior at that level of problematic or higher is unacceptable because it might get quote tweeted by J.K. Rowling, you have to remember that J.K. Rowling was out there name searching and quote tweeting like 30 follower trans accounts and talking about how they're threatening her life by making jokes about her being shitty or whatever.
All
It's
right,
like
so talk
with the
about that.
conservatives. It's like with the conservatives again. You know, you can't listen to the conservatives when they tell you the only reason I'm this shitty is because of this innocuous behavior on your part. You can't listen to them when they say that.
Okay, but don't wouldn't you rather they listen to you?
They're not going to listen to me. The conservatives, they're set. J.K. Rowling wants trans people dead. Nothing I do or say is going to change that.
Okay, so then why not talk about that instead of like
I do.
how you described it, second grade sexist language?
I can do both. They don't detract from each other. I love second grade sexism. And I've criticized J.K. Rowling pretty extensively on my channel in informative and in-depth ways with minimal ad homs. Um, but I also liked the ad homs. I mean,
Okay,
we
I
have to be
think you would be a lot
permissive of these
you would be a lot
eccentricities.
more useful of a public figure if you would drop the ad homs. Then is
With
what I'm saying.
respect, I wouldn't have a platform if I dropped the ad homs. Why do you think people follow me? For the extremely reasoned, calm, and never confrontational takes? What you're trying to do is sandbelt off all the eccentricities that allows for diversity of tactics. The left can be stronger if we embrace that
Can't,
diversity of tactics,
can't,
and I am a relatively sparse representation of that type of behavior.
okay, but can't you be eccentric without like being sexist? Okay, and who's here? I'm trying to think of who's uh the black gay conservative on TikTok. I'm forgetting his name.
Christian Walker.
Yeah, Christian Walker. Like when you were reacting to him and Hassan's stream, like some of the things you said, like were very like yikes. Why did he say that? Like you made comments that were directed at him, not for his political views. Like you just outed him for being like a little like fruity acting or whatever.
Yeah, because he's a fruity
Like
little
oh,
gay boy.
this is okay for drag shows, but not when you're talking about uh so and so conservative belief.
No, I have
Like
sex
why
with
do you
men.
have to bring that in?
I
Like
have
don't
every
you
right
understand?
to make fun of gay queens. That's the right that I've earned by putting up with them while trying to get laid.
All right, dude, this is what I'm talking about.
No,
Like
wait, really though? What? So like imagine okay, so imagine like a woman making fun of a guy's like stereotypically straight behavior. Like there's a guy who's doing like some douchey jock bro shit and a woman's critiquing his content and she's like, "Oh my fucking god, I've dealt with so many straight guys like this." Nobody would have an issue with that. I'm a guy and I've slept with
okay,
guys. I know the prissy little queens like him. I know what he's like. I know what he wants. And I know why he acts like that in public. His pathology is written on his face as aggressively as all these fratty straight boy bros. Pathologies are written on theirs. I don't think there's a difference there.
Okay, but by using ubiquitously like homophobic language, like I don't. Again, it's just an optics thing. I don't understand like why you think it's useful, especially since it's not just him that's going to be listening. There are other people that are going to be listening, and you're not going to especially bring conservatives over when you're just using those tactics right back at them.
Well, conservatives
And
like homophobia, so
that
maybe.
does circle back to the whole buy guns thing. It's just I just feel like you're using their same tactics of extremism a
Well,
lot
I
of the time.
think so. 2 points to this. First of all, I actually think that my willingness to casually engage in behavior like that has given me a lot of legitimacy with conservatives. At least when I get emails or I talk to them sometimes, it seems like, the willingness to do that edgy humor stuff makes me come off a lot less uptight, which I do think is effective for bringing them over. But additionally, with the homophobia thing, I would agree if I felt like my audience was kind of like mixed company, you know? So if I was like talking for if my audience was more like centrist leaning, I might be a bit more careful with that stuff. My audience is like really, really, really gay. I don't think there's any real homophobia here. If anything, a lot of what I'm doing is kind of repurposing like anti-bottom rhetoric that I use ubiquitously anyway. Um, which, so being anti-gay bottom is a kind of homophobia, but it's not the kind of homophobia that real homophobes tend to engage in. Like real homophobes, the people who actually want to take away the rights of gay people, the homophobia they engage in tends to be a general disgust with the idea of men sleeping with men. Whereas with bottoms, it's more about like the mannerisms of submissives in the gay community, which that is a kind of homophobia. It's just I don't know how easy it is to repurpose that for the with the intent of actually hurting gay people, culturally. Does that make
All
any
right.
sense?
I suppose it does. I still think that whole monologue you gave just isn't going to go through people's heads when you just say something that is easy to interpret as just blatantly homophobic or blatantly racist. Like in that same stream, you also said, uh, like, oh, thought I only expected this from white conservatives. I guess not. Like it was just it's just like these weird like
I don't remember
ironically
exactly what
or
he
post
said.
ironically or whatever like bigoted comments you make.
I don't remember exactly what he said, so I can't comment necessarily on what I was responding to, but
I
I,
don't think it matters what he said. The problem I'm saying is like you
I don't
just
think it's inherently bigoted to point that out. Like if a white conservative, like a Nazi or something, or said like, yeah, I think white people are better than black people. This is bad. It's morally wrong. If a black person said the same thing, if they had the same ideology, I don't think it's racist to go like, oh, okay, well, well, that's a pretty wacky thing for you to say, but all right. I don't think it's racist to point that out. You're not impugning a person based on their race there. You're just pointing out what evidently seems to be a contradiction between their stated beliefs and their lived experiences. Like you could make that same comment, like nobody would accuse me of classism because nobody believes classism is a real thing unless you're on left Twitter. But like when poor people are doing this, like like fuck poor people, we live in a meritocracy, anyone who's poor doesn't work hard enough. They're also doing the same thing. They're doing the exact same like self-hate projected outward. And I think you can point that out too. You can be like, I wouldn't, you live in a trailer park. I wouldn't expect to hear that from you. Okay, but I don't think that's classist necessarily. I think you're just pointing out, like, why the fuck do you? Because maybe you can like point out like the disconnect, or like you try to reach them on that, like there's some internal contradiction or cognitive dissonance you could point to, like that kind of thing. And obviously, if you're responding to a video, you can't do that to them because they're not listening to you. But maybe people in the audience who are 50-50 on you, they might be able to resonate that.
all right.
Just a possibility, it's not all calculated. I do think it's weird.
Well, you seem to be calculated on certain things. Like, I mean, it seems you're making it pretty clear that depending on who you're responding to or who you're debating with, you're going to kind of change your rhetorical style, right?
I try to, but I don't put that much thought of it in the moment to moment conversation because I feel like it detracts from the authenticity, Like I don't ever want to come across like I'm some kind of like CBS anchor or whatever. Like I'm sitting here with my tie adjusted and I'm trying to deliver like this, a rehearsed argument. I think people tend to enjoy the idea that I'm just out here just kind of firing this off the top of my head, and I enjoy being that person because I think that's a more authentic representation of how people tend to engage with politics anyway. The whole like carefully crafted stage show reading off the teleprompter attitude towards politics is representative only of those in the media, politicians, professional managerial class, people like that. For regular people, I think a lot of this comes down to like, what you say and think in that moment. And in that context, I try to be thoughtful, but it's still an off the cuff thing.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess I just fundamentally disagree with you on that then, because I mean, authenticity is important, but in terms of what you're talking about and the effects that your speech is going to have, it's the same problem with Joe Rogan, which you would agree that Joe Rogan, though it may be cool that he has like an off the cuff style, you agree, right, that his platform being as massive as it is and the people who are listening to him being influenced by him, you would agree, right, that it's irresponsible for him to be doing what he's doing.
Sure, but my
So I
issue with
guess I
him
would just
isn't his authenticity. It's the stupid fucking shit he says, right? I don't have an issue with his
all right,
presentational
okay, so
style.
that I would just extend that to you then.
I don't think I'm saying stupid fucking shit.
I'd say sometimes you do is what I'm saying.
Well, hurts to hear that. Um, for what it's worth, I don't really think there's a relationship between the aesthetic of delivery and how stupid the shit you say is. Because even though Joe Rogan is a very casual guy, and he does say a lot of stupid shit, there are plenty of conservatives who will say stupid shit in a very rehearsed, performative, delivered, style. So, yeah, I don't know how much of a relationship there is between the aesthetic of the speech and the quality of the speech.
Well, again, I would say both are important, but what you're saying isn't really just delivering to the aesthetics. Especially like we can circle back to the whole buy guns thing
Well,
and
I
how I think it's just an optical failure because of the amount of gun deaths being suicides and the high suicide rate of the trans community. I just think inherently that what you're saying makes it a problem due to those factors.
right,
I'm,
but
I'm saying
I
net
have to
you're
trust.
causing more harm than good.
This would be like if I told my audience they should get into riding bicycles instead of driving cars, and you pointed out that people who watch live streamers tend to be fatter, which makes it more likely they're going to get into an accident, so it's irresponsible for me to do it. I have to trust in my audience to a certain extent. I exercise this rhetoric as responsibly as I can, but past a point, like, if I say like, hey guys, you should try to eat like fruits and vegetables, and somebody like chokes to death while trying to eat an artichoke whole, there's an extent to which I feel like I can't be, like I'll do the best I can within the purview that I can. But you know, if I say like I think that bad political times are coming, and if you feel mentally well enough, I think it's good to own a firearm, especially if you're in like a relatively left leaning area. I don't think there's anything irresponsible about saying that.
Well, no, I stopped watching you around the time when your videos pretty much all began with remember, guys, conservatives hate you and they
Mhm.
want you dead.
Yeah, that
Buy
that's still
guns.
true.
Okay, but okay, no, no, that's again, that's exaggerative. And you know it's exaggerative. It's okay to point out the extremism, but I don't think you need to take it to that level.
Well, I don't mean literally every conservative in America hates you and wants you dead. I'm referring to a general tendency. Yes, that is true. But I think the hyperbole is justified, and well reasoned and proportioned within the circumstances. I do think that the conservative movement is ideologically aligned against the well-being of of many minority communities in this country, and that the logic of their attitude towards those communities is fundamentally a genocidal one. Mostly the trans community. That's the main one.
Okay, yes, fundamentally a genocidal attitude. Yeah, sure. But when you say things like that, it turns conservatives away, it turns liberals away, probably. It speaks to your audience, your far left audience, and I just don't think it really is helpful in the grand scheme of
Do you
things
understand how
because
you might be drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit when you're saying stuff like, okay, I agree that there are these bad tendencies on the right, but by pointing them out, you're actually somehow hurting our movement? Like, this is what
well, no, because
conservatives say.
you're not just pointing them out. You're bringing it all the way to, oh yeah, Republicans want you dead.
Sure. Yeah.
Like
Should I lie?
even if you're just referring to like the Republicans in the Senate, don't you see how that's kind of like counterintuitive?
No, the
Don't you see?
Republican the Republican Party right now is organized behind the narrative that trans people and people supportive of trans people are groomers, pedophiles. Mass labeling a minority demographic as pedophilic is a not only an easy precursor to genocide, but a not new one. It's not like it's not that uncommon. Obviously, once you've like essentially you're saying like this entire demographic is not only a social contagion, which they believe, of course, because they try to keep it from spreading to their kids. They've been doing that since, the 70s, with gay people. They also believe that trans people are part of like an organized elite liberal academic effort to transgender their children. It sounds silly when I say it like that, but that is literally what they say and believe. Like the speech and the
Right.
laws put forward by these officials, voted on by their constituents, reflects that belief. This language only makes sense as a precursor to genocide. There's no context in which you would introduce hundreds of local bills trying to, on every level, like everything you can do within the purview of the law, to strip them of their rights medically, legally, socially, and then frame them as child molesters as a group, and then that not lead to some kind of like broader violence against them, which already exists, of course, in its own extent, but it can only get worse. It can get worse from here. So in that context, I think, they hate you and they want you dead is a pretty reasonable thing to say. Of course, I don't
Well,
literally
no.
mean no conservatives can be moved over, but like that's what the movement's doing.
Okay. Well, no, I wouldn't characterize that as they want you dead. It's they want to strip you of all your legal rights and socially ostracize you.
Well,
I don't really the genocide is coming from that.
why? Okay, out of curiosity, what makes you think that like the this doesn't lead to mass death?
I think it does. It leads to a uptick in political violence, and it leads to probably a higher rate of suicidality.
Okay. Um, I mean, if we follow in the line of examples of previous times that far right movements have led a social crusade against what they perceive to be degeneracy against the state, like, um, if they like achieve the political power they want, don't you think it's kind of reasonable that Republicans might start, I don't know, arresting people who are trans, like en masse, or sending them over to constructed, um, like what is the term? The electrotherapy, the forced conversion camps, because they've talked about that as well. The idea that um, transgenderism is a social contagion and that it needs to be cured. Like that's not an uncommon attitude in a lot of these conservative circles.
Yeah, and that again, I hope that doesn't happen. I
Me
hope we
too.
don't get to that point. I hope that we can deter the power of the Republicans. I hope that the courts can change for the better. I hope Biden can put in some more Supreme Court judges. Like,
Well, I agree. I hope for those things too. Sure. But right now, the Supreme Court is tilted conservative. Depending on how Harper v. Moore goes and how the Democratic, the Department of Justice goes and how a lot of things go, we don't know how this country is going to be situated a couple years from now. We don't know how much of a legal barrier there's going to be between Republicans and genocide, proper, real genocide. At any rate, I think that just trying to force trans people into being second-class citizens itself is plenty justification for saying stuff like they hate you and they want you dead. But I guess like I have to lay this on the conservatives. If they don't want me saying that, then they shouldn't, lead a nationwide effort to ostracize a minority group. It's reasonable to be fearful.
Yeah, I agree. It's reasonable to be fearful. I just question your methods of instilling that fear.
All right, well,
But I
they
guess I have.
instill the fear. I'm just pointing out what they're doing. I mean, what if not for owning guns? I mean, what are we to do? And really, the whole "they hate you, they want to kill you" thing. I mean, God, the Republicans have really committed to this. Um, I feel like
Yeah, and
this
that's
isn't
what
like
I'm
a
saying. Aren't
flippant.
you just doing counter extremism in a way?
No, telling trans people to buy guns to defend their lives against state oppression is not the same as trying to do a genocide against trans people. Those are incomparable degrees of extremism.
Oh, okay. So wait. Is it for state oppression or is it for
Or
conservative militias?
far right militia groups, state oppression, either or. I don't think they're comparable to encouraging trans people to buy guns to defend themselves from such.
Okay, and again, like, how is state oppression? Like, how are owning guns going to help that?
Well,
How
that's
how is owning
complicated, but I
guns
do want to
gonna
indicate that, again, these are not two comparable forms of extremism. The
how is
extermination of a
owning guns gonna
minority.
help from psychotherapy, from uh uh putting trans people in jail? Like how are even going the full extent of like death camps? Like how is simply owning gun? That's the conservative logic that we're gonna need guns to protect from a tyrannical government. A tyrannical government doesn't care if you own guns.
No, the officers they send to your door do, though.
Uh, all right. I mean,
Wait, you just wait.
I'd like to see some
You brought
data
up
on
them
that.
sending you to death camps. Wait, am I the extremist here? What, like, if the Gestapo come to drag the Jews to the train yards, like, should the Jew have a gun? Sure. Like, what? Yeah, yeah, sure. What's gonna save them here? It's not like them not having a gun is going to save them. Yeah.
Well,
If things get
again,
if things get
the
that bad, then at that point, yeah, it's pretty much going to be a bloodbath, no matter how you handle it. Ideally, things don't reach the literal death camp level. Hopefully. I don't think any of us want that. Well, any of us in present company. There are Republicans who want that, of course, and they're fighting for it every day. Um, yeah, hopefully not.
all right. I guess I have nothing really left to say. I was gonna bring up something you said like 3 years ago, but I don't see how it's gonna change anything from this conversation right now. I
But
guess
I
I
want to
just
ask you. I just want to know, like, if there is like some giant like state genocide, or like right wing militias, or like marauding the country or whatever, like some shit like that. What? So we shouldn't own guns then? Like, what do we do? Just give up?
I would say that would be a case where we can probably start talking about yeah, some direct action.
You can't start
Uh
talking about it after it's already happened, though, right? Like, you need to have already talked
well,
about it.
no, but there are better methods of preventing that from happening is what I'm saying.
Sure, and I agree with that. Legislative stuff is generally more effective, but you can do both. Like, you can do the legislative stuff, and you can also, like, I don't know, stockpile a fuck ton of ammunition. They're not mutually exclusive. You just buy the ammo online.
All right. Well, I still disagree with you there just because I don't I just can't circumnavigate the idea that owning guns is more of a harm to citizens than not.
Well,
Just in a general sense.
do you agree that it would be effective if far right militias were trying to prey on liberal inner city areas in like social crisis?
Uh, I suppose it could help in certain instances, yes,
Because for
but
me, that's the big
I
one.
don't think that would stop it from happening.
Well, that's the big one for me, because like so far right militias represent a tiny minority of people in this country, right? But guns are a force multiplier. A block, like, if you have like 10 guys in two trucks, like far right dudes, Patriot Prayer, whatever, neo Nazis, and they want to like occupy a city block of Portland or something, like you've got 5-over-1s, it's like a majority minority community. If they drive through there and like nobody in that neighborhood has a gun, they can do whatever they want. If you have a gun, you have infinite power for people who don't in a situation like that. It's just how it is. But if there are people in that neighborhood who do have guns, like, They have no idea which of the hundreds of windows facing the street have rifles aimed through them. That right there is like a hard stop on occupation. Cities are almost impossible to occupy unless you have like heavy equipment. Because unless you have like an armored vehicle or tanks or whatever, like shit the military has, like you cannot just drive through a city street and not get reduced to mincemeat from the people who you're trying to shoot first because they're in the buildings and you're not, you know? It's like a really effective. So for me, like that's the thing. Like if they ever trying to start like shoot up a neighborhood or something, just a few people in that neighborhood having guns makes a huge difference. And that's like a community defense thing too. It's not like an interpersonal like go out there and be Rambo type thing. You know, it's like get to know your neighbors. You know, if anything bad ever happens, like does one of us have a gun? That kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that seems like it's a very specific situation that would need to happen. But
Any kind of occupation short of full on military occupation would be would be covered by that, I think. I mean, obviously, if people start bringing in like, you know, if like fighter jets are flying over the city, like obviously at that point, you know, you can't, you know, gun ownership's
I
not going
just
to do
think
much for you. But
I just think it shouldn't be a citizen's duty uh, to uh, own a gun and protect their community like that.
well, I agree that it's bad that we're put in this situation. I don't want to be in this situation. But if the state fails to you know uphold this responsibility, then it's better to have a fallback than to just you know like shrug our shoulders and go like, oh yeah, well they fucked over, so we're fucked.
All right, but again, that leads to I think the left owning guns, the left using basically the same rhetoric as the right when it comes to guns, which I
I
mean,
don't think we
effectively,
are.
that's what you're doing. Is you're saying like it's for self-defense reasons, and I think that will only bolster right-wing extremism.
I don't really see
That'll only
how.
that'll only increase a reason for these right because right now, like you said, there's not an abundance of right-wing militias going around.
The
But
right has been saying
I
the
just think
left is
with
going to
the
take their
rhetoric you're
guns
using,
for years.
that'll give more credence to the idea that there should be.
But they've been telling themselves that the left is going to come and take their guns for years. They've been talking about Antifa like there's some kind of organized militant group. It went all the way up to Donald Trump, who couldn't even condemn the Proud Boys. The far right militias are a small portion of the community, just because militias aren't that common. You know, we don't live in like Mad Max world. But the right already believes this stuff about us. We shouldn't weaken ourselves because we're afraid that our strength would encourage the right to get stronger. They've been arming guns for, or they've been like stockpiling guns for decades.
Can you not see like centrist or like Tim Pool types like looking at an increase in ownership of guns on the left and advocacy for gun ownership on the left, and they could not use that to pull in more conservatives who are maybe on the fence
He
from
already
the far
does.
right?
Look at his videos. Every single video of his is like, Civil War is coming, the Antifa's insane, they're going to come into your house. Literally, watch his content. He's already doing what you're saying he's doing. They're
All right,
already
maybe
doing this, all of them. They've been fear-mongering over this for decades. They've been stocking up ammunition and guns for decades. This is what I mean. Don't listen to them when they tell you, ooh, if you start to defend yourself, then we're going to get really angry. Because they're lying. They just want you to not defend yourself. They want you to not have guns. The right is hoping you don't buy guns. Because there is a significant portion of the right that is waiting for this big day of the rope. And when that happens, they don't want us to be capable of defending ourselves.
all right. I mean, I guess you do have a point. You know, I won't. I still think I'm a bit shaky on your rhetoric in general, but think you've explained it well. So I'm willing to leave it there.
Yeah, well, you know, it's all of this is a contingency plan, right? Obviously, the goal is that Dark Brandon, you know, single-handedly fixes all the country's problems, but I'm just concerned that's not going to pan out in the long term.
Yeah, well, I think long term, best thing to do is to make sure that there's a brighter political and legislative future in America. So I don't
Well,
know.
sure, I agree.
I just think you're a little too loose with your rhetoric.
I don't think it
And I think,
destroys our political foundation or cheapen our discourse by advocating people buy guns to defend themselves if the time arrives.
all right.
It projects strength. Strength is a good thing politically. I mean, politics is all about strength, really, at the end of the day. So we've only ever made ourselves look weak with this liberal abstemiousness, this let Republicans do whatever they want because at the end of the day, their bad behavior will sully the party's image and Democrats will come out looking shiny. It just hasn't
Well, I'm not
worked.
saying to let them do whatever they want, but I mean, I guess final question, like, because I'm not sure what your exact position is, but where do you stand on like gun legislation?
I talked about this a little bit ago. I think there are a couple of things that I'm okay with. Um, I think the red flag laws, I was cool with those. Wait times to buy firearms, I was cool with those. There were a couple other. I did a thing in it. I forget the details. There are some that I'm okay with. Because for me, like the main thing that I care about vis-a-vis the firearm ownership is community defense, and you don't need anything that wacky for that. I'm not out here advocating for unregistered automatic weapons or anything like that.
All I'm saying is in countries like Japan that have really strict gun laws, that's where the fewest gun deaths are.
Well, yeah, but they don't
So
already
I'm
have
I'm
hundreds of millions
pretty
of guns.
strongly in favor of gun control for that reason. Just it seems like the most effective thing to do about gun violence, besides like fixing poverty issues, because I think ultimately that's where you're going to get the most violent crime coming from.
Yeah, sure, but
So,
we don't live in Japan. We got hundreds of millions of guns here. As long as we are in a country with this many guns, the Japan situation just ain't happening. They're an island nation that already has very few guns. Um, Over here in the States, I mean, we can't do gun bans. Like literally, we can't. There are too many guns for us to count. It's like it'd be like trying to ban dirt. Good luck. So until we reach that point, I think we have to have a pragmatic attitude towards gun legislation.
well, wouldn't you say that um, because of far right extremism that we can justify having stricter gun laws?
No,
That
I don't
and
think they're
that's
gonna.
more effective than advocating for gun ownership on the other side.
I don't think far right militias are going to give up their guns because Joe Biden told them to. If anything, the only people who'd be hurt by those restrictions on firearm ownership would be the people who I want to get guns. The kind of people who are out there in like rural Oregon stockpiling firearms and ammunition at like their shed probably aren't going to be affected that much by any legislation, and they're probably buddy buddies with the cops over there too, so they're not going to get in trouble because those cops will think the rules are bullshit too. But it might deter some of the fine people in my chat from getting their guns. So I don't think that's a reliable way of disarming the militias.
All right, I guess fair point. Uh, I don't really have anything left to say, so thank you for having this conversation.
I appreciated the conversation, and it was a clean hour. It's very orderly.
Awesome, and yeah, I might start watching your content again. We'll see how I feel.
I'll ramp it up and make it even more extremist to heighten the moral challenge on your end.
All right, I look forward to it.
Take care.
All right, you too.
Bye. We explored some ideas today, didn't we, folks? I don't think he was dishonest. He just disagreed. I mean, obviously, he's more liberal leaning. Yeah, people in chat assume bad faith real easy. I really enjoy the lib debates. Yeah, well, they're fun. Bring back the trans rights at the end of the debates. I'll consider it. He was right about the ironic bigotry, though. Look, I'm gonna be real with you, okay? The left is so fucking cucked, man. The fact that, like, there are so many leftists on YouTube, and of them, I'm in, like, the top 1% edgiest, and, like, I'm getting in trouble for, like, lunchbox sexism. You know what I mean? Like, god damn, man. It's like, holy shit. We really are puritanical, aren't we? In our own way. Like we have to get over ourselves a little bit with the optics frogging on that, right? Like, like man, you have to transition, Vaush. It's the only way. Yeah, I guess so. I guess the main thing that gets me is people have to remember that a huge part of the reason why young guys go over to the right instead of the left is that, like, the left comes across as so fuddy-duddy, you know, so anti-fun. And, yeah, you just, man, fuck. It's, you know, people are, oh. Yeah, I didn't even add J.K. Rowling in that tweet. Yeah, whatever. Well, how are we all doing, folks? Hey, hey. Hey, hey. We're doing good? I think I have a conversation in 1 hour. And another guy emailed me. Wait. Are you free tonight? We're really getting into the debates again, folks. We're rolling right through them. We're gonna get right into it. We have no one on the docket right now, though. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Trump speech next, maybe MGR DLC. Not MGR. No, we're not playing games. Trump speech. How long is the Trump speech? How long did that go on? Yeah, Merrick, I can see that. The discourse went to shit. 2 hours long? Ugh, okay. We'll have to do a whole thing for that. Yeah, we'll do Keffels soon. Yeah, I've seen 3 Arrow's recent video. Can we be happy for Keffels first? Give me a minute. I barely got a chance to talk to you fuckers before the debate started. How you guys doing? Huh? Hey, hey, whoa, whoa. Hey, hey, whoa, whoa. Are you arguing that utilizing casual sexism is consequentially better for pushing people left? I'm saying that pearl clutching over incredibly minor problematic language is very effective in pushing people right. That's what I'm saying. I don't know whether or not mild sexism is great at pulling people to the left. I do know that freaking out over mild sexism is going to push people to the right. Nobody wants to join the left when they feel like they're going to be walking on eggshells the whole time. Ain't good. Ukrainian troops reportedly liberated Vysokopilya, Kherson Oblast. Hey, nice. Bazinga. Vaush, the Jews had guns and they lost. First of all, it's not about whether or not you win. It's just about what's most effective. You know, we're a process-based analysis stream here. Thank you. Second of all, no, there was gun rights were stripped from Jews and some other groups before the Holocaust really ramped up. Third of all, what lesson do you want to take from that exactly? Like, what? Even if what you said was true, like, oh, it didn't work. The Jews weren't able to defend themselves against the entire Nazi state. Therefore, there's no, like, come on, use your brain. Use your brain. Think hard.